Well, it's such a pleasure to speak to you today with Inspired World magazine.
Thank you very much. It's nice to talk to you too.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for taking the time out to speak to us because I'm quite excited about sharing your story with our readers. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how your story began? Obviously, I know a lot about you.
Yes.
And I've been following you on TED, and I think you're so inspirational. But would you like to share with us how it all started for you? Because you were quite young, weren't you, when you started your first speeches?
Well, I first got interested in the food system when I was 8 years old, and I just happened to stumble upon an article on the internet about mercury was found in high fructose corn syrup. And at that age, I knew what mercury was from third grade science and that it could kill you. But I had no clue what high fructose corn syrup was. And so my first thing was, okay, I got to ask mom. Mom knows, obviously. And she thinks for a second and says, the only thing I can think is it's in is the sweeteners used in sodas. And for an 8-year-old kid, that was just like my epiphany moment, my light bulb above the head going, why is there something that can kill us in the food we eat? If not daily, at least at least weekly. And I simply said to her that I wasn't going to drink sodas anymore. And it began this long studying of the food system and what we eat. And 3 years after I started researching, I did my first speech, which was the TED Talk.
That's amazing. And how did you come to get the gig with TED? How did that come about?
Well, my mom was a fan of TED on Facebook, and there was a post by this organization called TEDx Next Generation Asheville, the event organizers that I did my speech with. And they said, hey, all you preteens or all you teens in the Asheville area, send in, if you have an idea worth spreading, send in a request to speak here. And she's like, oh, look at this. You've always been interested in the food system, and you've always wanted to tell people, your friends and families about it. This would be a really great chance for you to tell a larger audience. And I looked at it and I read the form, and it says from ages 13 to 19. Now I'm only 11. And she goes, well, why don't you just send in a form and see what they say? The worst they can do is tell you no. And I sent in a form, and 7, 8 months later, it ended up speaking on the stage in Orange Peel, at the Orange Peel in Asheville. To make a long story short, and that talk was the first actual public speech that I ever gave about the food system.
And it was so inspirational as well. You did such an amazing job. And I'll put the
Thank
link
you.
up for our readers so they'll be able to watch that speech. So, what did your friends and family think about after you did the speech, and how did that then go along and change your life? Because there must have been a massive change
Oh
for you.
yes, definitely. The thing about this talk was the day that I did the talk was August 28th of 2010, and it was it was a wonderful talk, and a lot of my friends and family said, "Oh, you did a great job." But the talk wasn't posted on YouTube until about a month later, and that day that it came on YouTube, I told my mom, "Oh, just share it. Just put it on a couple organic companies' Facebook pages, like Organic Valley or Nature's Path, and I'd like to try to get the word out there." And she did that, and I guess people started watching it, and it started getting shared all over the place, and that's really what catapulted it. Was, I guess, the message and the way that I conveyed the talk really stuck with a lot of people.
Yeah, it's amazing when you're so passionate about something and when you've got such big intentions, how the universe opens up for you and amazing things happen. And that's basically, what's happened to you. So tell us a bit more about yourself. So I believe you're homeschooled, are you? So,
Yes.
and do you live in a rural area? So you're obviously interested in farming. So how did that come about then, the whole...
Well, I began homeschooling when I was 9 years old, about a year after I started learning about the food system. And I actually grew up in the suburbs of a fairly minor city here in Tennessee. And right now, after I've begun speaking and learning about food, I live part-time in a fairly rural area where we have many neighbors that are farmers. But when I started learning originally about this subject, I had no clue really what a farm was, I just had this vague concept that most Americans have of, the pigs running around in the mud and the,
Yeah.
the farmer that wears the faded overalls and plaid shirt and cowboy hat, as most people do here in America, we have this, vague idea of what farming is, but we really don't know the truth. And so that's how my background is I look at, before all this, I really came from a family that had the average or minor amount of knowledge than that most people have here in America.
Yeah, because I think that's what we all like to think, that that's how, animals are slaughtered and things like that. And I'm vegan myself, so obviously my whole life changed when I watched Earthlings. Have you ever seen that documentary? It's called
I believe I've seen parts, clips from the documentary. Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. So, who are your mentors then? You, Joe Salatin. He had a big role to play in your life, didn't he?
Oh, definitely. Joel Salatin was really the man who made me who made me have the decision to become a farmer. Many of the speeches and talks that I've watched of him, the way that he gives the message of farming and growing food makes it seem not only a noble quest, but for that we need more people of young ages to get into it, and not all these old timers that are hobby farmers. And you look, most of my statistics are here in the United States, but the number of farmers is less than 1% of the population here, and the majority of that percentage is people over 60 years old.
Yeah.
And there's not very many young farmers at all here in the United States, so we need to start getting kids and college graduates wanting to start farming and start growing food instead of people past their 40s and 50s.
And you are such an inspirational role model, and I'm sure that's what you're going to do. That's definitely what the purpose is. So talk to us a bit about what your ideas are about sustainable farming and organic farming, and how you feel that's the way forward now, that there's no need for industrial farming.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you talk about organic farming or sustainable farming, just like industrial farming, there's many different concepts and sides to it. I personally subscribe to organic farming as a whole, in the main fact and basis that says, we should use no chemicals, no pesticides or herbicides, no fertilizers that come from fossil fuels or petroleum or unhealthy sources. And that's the main idea that I subscribe to. But there are other parts of organic agriculture that I've learned and read about that I find quite interesting, like biodynamic agriculture, or Rudolf Steiner, which seems quite interesting to me. It can get quite complicated at times, but it has. I've talked to many farmers here in the United States who they grew up in the country, and they go, "I don't know how it works, but it just does."
Yeah.
And I've looked into things like permaculture and horticulture, and in the end, I feel like we just need to start with organics. Organics is the first step that is going to change this country's agricultural system. And we need to go back to the times where organic was conventional.
Yeah.
That organic was the norm. And it really bugs me when people say, organic, that's these old timers, these 80, 90-year-olds that are going, organic, that's some hippie stuff. And in truth and in fact, that's what they grew up with, was organic agriculture.
Yeah. Because
before the 40s and 50s, agriculture really there were no synthesized fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides. There were very little, if any. And it came from the military industrial complex after World War II, was what all this massive amounts of synthetic agriculture came from.
Yeah. And it's scary. And doesn't it taste so much? I only eat organic food, but doesn't it taste so much better as well? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I find that people are like, organic food and conventional food, there's no really difference.
Oh, it's massive.
But I've found, not only by eating organic food, that number one, it tastes a lot better, and number two, that I start feeling a lot better. I'll have, there'll be times that I have to go visit family out of state, or I have to go and go to a friend's house, and they don't have anything except conventional food, and I might have a snack or something to eat there, and it just makes me feel bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I go back to organic food, I'm like, oh, this is so much better.
Yeah.
And
you actually, and like
really,
to know that you're consciously putting in that stuff in your body, it actually,
yes.
Makes you feel so much better. Even the thought of putting in healthy food in your body.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's education. Because I think if people were educated and knew exactly the pesticides and the herbicides that were putting on the chemicals on the food, they wouldn't go into their kitchen and spray kitchen cleaner on their food and then eat it. And I think if they knew, it would.
I agree 100% with that, because I think that if everybody knew exactly what was in their food, everybody would throw down what they were eating immediately, and they would demand for something better.
Yeah, because
and the fact that it's just there's so much disinformation here in the United States with advertisement companies and the billions of dollars that are spent in lobbying systems in the government, that's kept the American public from really finding out about these things, or the massive majority of the American public.
Yeah.
And I hope to I just say that once you start researching and learning about these things, you really don't have to think that much to want to make a difference or want to start changing.
Yeah, because it's about your life, isn't it? It's about being healthy, isn't it? So.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And it's so. For me, I found that just telling people and that all you have to do is research and take a little bit of time out of each day to learn about these things.
Yeah.
And that's what changed me so much, is that I spent days and days for 3 years learning about anything I could about the food system, from the very seed that was put in the ground to how it was processed and how it eventually got to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And I feel that if everybody had a handle or a grip or knew an idea of what food actually is and how it's actually processed, then it would change a lot of people's ways of eating just by knowing what was in their food.
Yeah, for vegetables and also for the meat industry and the dairy.
Oh, for everything, for processed foods, for vegetables, for meat, for dairy. It just spreads all over the entire supermarket.
And people wonder why there's such a rise in cancer, and they don't directly link it with what they're actually putting in their mouth. And I thought it was such a wonderful thing what you said in one of your speeches, is that wouldn't you rather to invest in a little bit more, eating organic and knowing you're healthy, than pay the doctors at the end of it by being sick. And it's so true, if people invest in the foods. Because there is a want for it, isn't there, for organic foods?
What?
There is a want for it. People want to eat
organic.
Yes. Yeah.
I just find that, not only by eating organic food, you're supporting farmers, small local farmers. You're helping the earth from keeping it poisoned in your local water supplies, but you're also investing in your own health.
Yeah.
By, like I said, just a few extra dollars a week, then, on the end of the road, I've seen hospital bills of all sorts and kinds, and the amount that it costs to take care of things like cancer is unbelievable. My grandmother, 3 years ago, she passed away from cancer, and she was taking this pill for to try to help her, and each pill cost over $1,500.
Wow!
Just one pill, and just the fact of the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry has, definitely made a lot of people. It's like, I like to use this, it's big agriculture, big government, and big pharmaceuticals. Yeah. And they run in a circle. Big pharmaceuticals sends money to the government, so the government subsidizes big ag, and then big ag feeds people and make them sick. And it just goes in this big circle that tends to that helps each other make each other bigger and wealthier.
Yeah, they scratch each other's backs.
Oh, many times over, yes.
Because I've got cancer myself, and I chose not to have chemotherapy or radiotherapy. because I believe that your body can heal itself by just putting organic foods and the right kind of foods in your body. So obviously that's a progress I'm going through now, but I fully believe that my body will heal. But as you said, because of the big pharmaceuticals, the agriculture, it's all linked, isn't it? And that's
Oh,
why,
definitely.
we need young people like you to come along to educate young people. So you're changing the generation and the way they're all looking at the foods. And I thought also it's so interesting what you said about Hershey's, what you said that was put in the chocolate. Is it the American protein industry?
Hmm.
You spoke about that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, my dad, he works in industrial flooring, and he has visited this factory in Georgia
Yeah.
that after chickens are processed and cut up in their pieces, thighs and breasts and, the legs, the most valuable parts of the chicken, the necks and heads and bones are all discarded and sent to this factory where they take all these pieces and parts and they boil them down, and two they make them for two products. It's an emulsifier. It keeps things together and makes it stay the form or molded the way that they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And these chicken parts, this company that my dad went and did work in their factory, is their two biggest customers were Hershey's chocolate and Purina dog food.
Wow.
And so those are the two. I've read that Hershey's chocolate uses these proteins emulsifiers as to keep the chocolate bars together instead of breaking up or losing the cocoa powder and such. But just the fact that you have all these chicken parts that are just boiled down into this gelatin almost to put in chocolate. I that's made me stop eating like any Hershey's chocolate ever again.
Yeah. And I'm sure most people would stop eating it if they actually knew what went into their food. And it's just so important for all of us, to understand, and especially about the GMO. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what your feelings are about that?
Yeah, I feel like GMOs are probably the most important part of the food system these days, and the fact in the subject that's probably going to unify the most people. It hits on so many different parts and so many different subjects of the food system, from food monopolies and seed monopolies to the government, to lobbying in the government, and just to people not getting their food tested properly. And I feel that the fact that these companies like Monsanto, Dow, DuPont, Syngenta, the fact that in their own internal studies they found that these foods cause cancer and many other problems, and still release it to the public and don't let anybody know if you're actually eating it in your foods, and have a label that say this contains genetically engineered foods. I find that it's just disrespectful to people and their health.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the right to know what you're eating from that company, then they obviously don't care for your health or well-being, and just they care about how much money they can get out of you before you die.
Yeah. And it's such a shame, isn't it? And I remember seeing a picture of a piece of corn in a farmer's yard, and one was a GMO piece and one was just a normal, and he left it out for a few months, and the rats had eaten the whole of the corn, but they left the GMO one, and I thought that's just speaks for itself, really, doesn't it?
Animals know a lot better than us, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I've even seen it on with ants as well, that how they'll only take the natural food, natural butter and things like that.
There's been many studies that are similar to that, and it shows that one that I really found was interesting was that if you give a gorilla a banana that's been sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, it the grill will peel the banana and just eat the banana. But if you give an organic banana that has had no chemicals put on the fruit, it will eat it whole, the peel and all.
That's so interesting, and it makes so much sense because I mean, obviously they already are teachers as well, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And they can teach us.
And I guess they know a lot more about food, and they can just naturally know if when it's better than from them or not.
Yeah. And I think as a nation we just trust the government, and I just think it's time for us to all realise, and like yourself, if we all research like you, and if we're all like you, then I think we'd all be a lot healthier. But I just think it's incredible how much you're doing for your generation. So where are you now? Tell us a bit about where you are now, what you're up to now.
Well, right now I've recently come back from a trip to Russia. I was in Russia for 10 days, and I was going around the country there speaking to kids about food, healthier eating, and just trying to get more awareness there and understanding what is food, because still in a country that has banned GMOs from even growing there, they still don't really, the public still doesn't really have a handle of knowing what they are or what is happening to their food.
Yeah.
And after that, I've relaxed a little bit from that trip and taken some time off. But I'm going to Atlanta, Georgia, the end of this week to go and hear Joel Salatin speak again, and I'm going to hopefully meet up with him during the event. But it seems like it'll be a very interesting. The event it's a debate between Joel Salatin and Dr. Joe Mercola. And they're going to be talking about GMO labeling and their ideas and of how it should be undertaken.
So can you just explain, obviously, to Inspired for our readers, who Joel Salatin is?
Yes. Yeah. Joel Salatin is a farmer, an organic, well, he's not certified organic, but I consider him an organic farmer in Virginia, who they call him a lunatic farmer, because all of his neighbors do at least, and it's kind of stuck with him because of the way he farms, and everybody thinks he's crazy that he doesn't use pesticides or GMOs. And if you read about some of the things, the ways and concepts he has of farming, of the rotation of his chickens and cows, it's such common sense that I think that's the way everybody should farm these days.
Yeah, but is there pressure from the government, obviously, not to farm like that? Does he have pressure from the government?
Yeah, the pressure of the government is to farm one crop for millions of acres in an area, and that's what they feel like is the best way of farming, is these monocultures. But it really, to have many different types of crops and products, it's not only, it confuses the bugs and pests. They go, oh my gosh, there was tomatoes here last year, but there's only corn, and we don't like corn. Corn makes us feel bad. And that really helps. Number one is for pest control. And number two, if these farmers in the Midwest especially, they'll have, their big crop of corn fail, and then they have to sell their farm and sell everything they own because they borrowed so much money on this one crop. But when you diversify and you have so many different crops, you may have one crop fail, but you might have 7 other crops that have had a wonderful year and that back you up and pay for that crop you lost. Yeah. So really, in the end, it helps farmers from not having to just gamble every year on what they grow.
Yeah. There's a lot of pressure then, really, isn't there? Through fear, I suppose, that if the crop's going to fail. So there would be for those that do that subscribe to the monoculture ideas, but like I said, I feel like any farm that has a large amount of biodiversity ends up having just so many fallback options, and it helps in so many different ways. And you look in nature, and you don't see one type of tree growing for acres and acres and acres. You see so many different types of trees, so many different types of plants, and animals roaming around in the same area. Yeah. So I think it's more natural, too, to have farms that have a little bit of everything in them. Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? It's just get back to basics, really. As you said, as our grandparents used to to be,
Yes,
and
definitely.
it's definitely going to be a better farming industry. So, what would you advise for our young people now? Like, how could they get involved more?
I feel that, like, just as me, everybody should start out small. Start doing your research, looking into the things you don't know about the food system. And I started out just with, like, telling my friends and family about this. I'm like, I'd talk to my friends, I'd be like, dude, you gotta look at this article I just found. There's this, thing that they're doing with the seeds, and it's really freaky. They're taking genes from fish and putting them in tomatoes, and I used to wonder why some of these tomatoes would taste like fish, and that sort of thing. And then I would tell my grandparents and be like, you don't need to buy this. You need to. I just start talking to my friends and family, and have. I think another great thing is just to invite some of your neighbors over, and have a dinner that's only organic food.
Yeah.
Everybody has to bring like a potluck dish that's only organic, and just see how good it tastes.
Yeah. Or even to go to find a local farmer and to even go and help out at the weekends. I think that's really interesting. And then find out that way. Or even go, I help out in an allotment. My friend's got an allotment to grow our own food, and I love that. And I love bringing the children up there, and because you're out in nature and you're digging, you've got your hands in the soil, and it just feels great, to then bring home the food and eat it, and teach them where the broccoli comes from and where the carrots come from, because they only go to the supermarket or the store and just see them come in packages. They'll never know the whole cycle of the foods, and where it comes from. And I think you have to start with the smaller children, don't you, and teach them. It's so important.
I feel when kids at a very small age, from 6 below, if you give them a connection to food, where they are able to help and participate in growing what they eat, they will try things. They will be more willing to try different foods and not be so picky, rather than just giving them a carrot that you buy at the supermarket.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was about 5 years old, we had a small garden, spring garden, that we planted at my house. And I planted iceberg lettuce, my mom planted tomatoes, and my brother planted cucumbers. Mm-hmm. And so those 3 crops grew through the spring and into the summer. And then they were all able to be harvested one night, and so we took them all and made a salad. And I thought it was so cool, seeing that, little tiny seed to go up to the big lettuce and then, get to eat it. I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And now I look back at that story and I go, wow, I never really thought that'd be such a big part that I think of now.
Yeah.
But it's a story that I found that can be true to so many different kids in so many different ways.
Yeah, definitely. Even with my children, I juice carrots and beetroots and cucumbers and celery, and even getting them involved, pushing it down, and then they see it come out, and then they drink it, and then they know where it all comes from. And it's so great to see them get so excited about it, and seeing the different colours and the textures, and then tasting it. And sometimes they don't like it, and sometimes you got to try it, don't you? Got to try different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think these kids saying that I don't like that and they've never tried it is such a ridiculous thing. So
yeah, well, unfortunately, because when they're used to drinking orange juice from the store, it's so processed and there's so many additives in it. That's the problem. Their little taste buds are so used to processed food.
Well, I'll tell you something funny is that as a little kid, I used to drink more orange juice than milk. My grandmother and grandfather, they would have, a gallon of orange juice and a gallon of milk in their fridge, and they'd offer me milk, and I just didn't like milk. I never really could drink it when I was little, and I look back at it, and I guess my body really didn't like all those hormones and antibiotics and said, you don't need this. And that after, wondering what it was, it's like, you like orange juice a lot better because it doesn't have as much bad stuff in it.
That's the thing.
So.
Yeah, and people just don't realise how much bad stuff there is in milk. And how bad it is, because the government story is, you've got to drink it for calcium, you need it, and, it's so wrong. And there's so many different variations you can have, like almond milk and hazelnut milk. I drink coconut milk, which is absolutely delicious, and it's so good for you. And again, it's just really education, isn't it?
Yeah, if you actually eat organic foods that have the nutrients in them, the micronutrients especially,
Yeah.
is you don't need milk to get your calcium or vitamin D. You can get it in vegetables, but with the monocultures, they sap the nutrients from all the soils, so that way there is no vitamin D or calcium in there left by the time you get the corn.
Yeah.
So by organic farming standards, I find that the nutrients in the food is so much higher, and you can definitely taste the difference.
Yeah, I can definitely myself taste the difference, and you look forward to eating them now. I
Mm-hmm.
love the fact now that I've changed to only organic, and I will obviously want to spread the word as well with everybody, because it's so much better for you and healthier. So, what are your plans now for the future? So, are you going to become a farmer? And
Yeah, that's my hope is for the next. My plan is for the next 6 years or so, 4 6 years, is to continue speaking and sharing the message about organic farming and continue um, educating the public about the food they eat. And my hope is that by that time GMOs will be able to be labeled here in the United States and also maybe banned from production and importation. But that's maybe a little stretching it right now. But my eventual hope is about 20 years old is to start learning more about farming and maybe take some classes. And by the time I'm about 23, I hope to have the chance to and the money to buy my own farm. I really don't want to loan any money from a bank. I don't like banks.
yeah,
And I just after reading The Grapes of Wrath, that's kind of makes you feel like farmers and banks don't really go well together. And I feel that by the time I'm 23 to 25, I'd like to have my own farm and start providing people with food.
yeah. I think that's an amazing intention to put out there, and I have no doubt that you will do that. If
Yes.
not before then, definitely. And you're one to watch, definitely. And I look forward to watching your journey from now. And I'm really grateful that you took the time out today to speak to us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful talking to you too.
Yeah, thank you, Barb.